Hello and welcome to our webinar, Scaling Creative in the Era of Andromeda. Today, we're going to be covering everything that you need to know to adapt your paid social strategy to this new world. I'm going to be covering all the technical elements. We've got Toby from NUSA Studios to give his perspective on the content production side. Ryan from Bird and Blend is going to join us to give us that brand side point of view as well. And finally, I'm going to be going into use cases for AI creative. So we've got a lot to cover in an hour, and I'm going to dive straight into it, starting with looking at the technical elements of Andromeda. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Let's get into it. We can't really know how to adapt until we fully know what it is. So what is Meta's ad architecture? You probably all heard about Andromeda, but there are more elements to this. We've got Lattice, which is fundamentally its ad ranking architecture. It ties everything together. We've got sequence learning, which is the chronological timeline of a user. It will tie that user journey and all the touch points within paid social in the Meta platforms. We've got Andromeda, which is the buzzword really, isn't it? Everyone knows about Andromeda. It's Meta's new ad retrieval engine. It can source ads from a greater pool of ads than ever before. And then finally, we've got GEM, which is pattern recognition at scale. So it's stepping back from the individual user and looking at touch points and aspects of campaigns and creative that drive sales. So that's what it is. Let's talk about Andromeda. Andromeda is a big one. Later in 2025, in late 2020, Andromeda was everywhere. And the two components that were particularly important with Andromeda, there's the diversity side of things, and there is the volume side of things. So from a diversity standpoint, a big change is that Meta is going to be grading your assets in terms of their similarity. Similar assets are going to be given the same entity ID, and Meta is going to judge these as essentially the same asset. And then there's the volume side of things. Along with that narrative, a lot of other agencies are saying that we need to have more volume within our ad accounts than ever before. And that's quite a difficult thing to address as a brand. Creative is expensive to run, and we need to have those data points behind it before we commit to producing massive amounts of assets and high volume of assets. So we've been running tests at the start of this year on how important to try and see how important volume is. So two tests. We've got test one, which is low volume versus mid volume. Here we ran a batch of mid volume assets, so 26 assets in total. We established the top performers. Once we'd done that, we broke them out. These are our top performing assets, and we ran them against that original 26. Test two, mid volume versus high volume. So here we ran a batch of 20 ads versus an enormous amount of ads, 50 ads, the max you can get in a single ad set, and we compared the results. We briefed in things like creative similarity. Of course, you can always do some similarity better and create more visual standpoints, but create more visual diversification, but it was baked into the tests. So what were the results? So test one and test two, low volume, 5 ads versus that 27 ad peer set. We actually saw that low volume drove more sales at a lower CPA. And test two, mid volume versus max volume. Again, we saw the same result. We saw more sales driven with a lower volume of ads. And to me, that tells me that volume isn't as important as diversity. In a good creative strategy on Meta, we need to be nailing that diversity element first. So thinking about content themes, visual styles, or mapping to specific personas and audience types. This is what everyone needs to nail before they get to the point where they try to scale up their creative. Volume alone isn't enough. So how do we get a diverse creative strategy? First, we need to try and understand exactly what that is. So what is diversification? And this is a handy infographic from Meta. On the left, we've got less differentiated content. On the right, we've got more differentiated content. On the left, you can see ads have very similar visuals, very similar messages, Meta's going to classify these ads as the same ad, and having them in the account isn't going to really be much benefit to you. On the right, we've got differentiated content. We've got diversified visuals, we've got diversified messages. This is creative diversity. So how do we get there? It's all well and good seeing this as an example, but everything really needs a framework. And I'm going to start from the bottom up. I'm going to think about formats. So it's a simple one, ad formats. Everyone's been doing, everyone knows ad formats. Everyone knows you need images and videos, but it's important to have that balance within your ad account. Over the last 10 years, everyone's been banging on about video, haven't they? But the reality is we need to have a balance. We need to have, an even split of video versus image in a con. It is actually a good thing. So that's formats. Let's look at visual styles. So visual styles is what it looks like. Is it a hi-fi production video? Is it lo-fi UGC? Is it influencer-led branded partnership? Is it just a simple graphic, or is it motion graphic? This is another pillar of diversity. And on top of that, you've also got your hooks. Within your ad component, you can mix and match different types of hooks. When we speak about hooks, we're not just talking about that text element, we're also speaking about that visual. It's important that that first 3 seconds of your video or the graphics that are included in your ads are visually different. And then finally, we've got our message. So that's your brand and product message that you're getting across. Are you using all aspects of your brand within your creative strategy? And finally, are you mapping them to personas? So personas are audience groups, and a good way of thinking about this is breaking them down to specific motivators and barriers. Motivator might be that positive emotional pull to get someone to purchase, and a barrier is that slightly negative hesitation stopping them from purchasing, and we'll get onto that in a second. So how do we increase differentiation? So we've gone through pillars of diversification, but let's map that out into a framework. Might look slightly overwhelming, but it's a really good way of breaking down a single motivator from a single persona to eventually end up with a lot of different creative formats. So we're starting with that motivator, that psychological trigger, that emotional pull and the feeling and outcome that makes it worth buying your product. The visual style, simply breaking it down into hi-fi and lo-fi in this case. So that alone is going to create diversification of brand production. Video versus UGC looks very different. Then we've got our hook types. And finally, and the more simple side of things, we've got that creative format. So you can see very quickly, just through one single motivator, we can end up with a lot of ads that look very visually distinct. And the same applies to the barrier side of things. So what actually stops someone buying? It can be both emotional and transactional. We need to try and address those fears that stop someone from buying in the first place. Persona-based marketing is being hyped up right now, but it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. It all started back in the 80s, which feels like a very long time ago. It's persona-based marketing now, but previously it was mosaics, and it was same kind of concept, audience profiling that was used within direct mail and media planning, and it was part of the Experian group. A lot of people have probably heard of Experian. They used it in a non-digital sense. It expanded, as things do, into digital, and then Meta and most advertising platforms latched on. Started with interest base, but now with iOS, where we don't have as many interests to target, and in the era of Andromeda, where creative is your targeting, it's really important to go back to the fundamentals of marketing and think about exactly what your audience want. We've got to address those fundamental wants of your customer, and that can be mapped out into motivators and barriers. So let's look at a specific use case. So I'm going to look at a generic use case for a collagen supplement brand. We're going to map out a couple of personas, look at their motivators and barriers and what we can do with them. So there are a lot of personas that you could make. I'd recommend just starting with a few if it's something that you're new to. Like you saw in those charts before, you can end up with a lot of different concepts, and you need to prove it works in terms of a creative workflow first. So for this collagen supplement brand, we've got our audience profile, the research-led buyer. We've got motivators and we've got barriers. So motivators, if someone's research-led, they need to have that data-driven action behind why they might buy collagen from a brand. They want to know about clinical trials. They want to know what's in their product, so ingredient transparency. And they also want to hear from experts, so pharmacists, doctors, GPs. It means more to them than influencer posts. From a barrier perspective, everyone's a little bit cynical. Everyone's all heard the same claims. Everyone says they're the best. They need to see the actual data. From a process knowledge gap perspective, they might understand the science, but it's also useful to describe things in layman's terms. They understand why it should be useful, but explain it to me in a more clear way. And finally, price anchoring. So it's a very competitive market. There are cheaper brands that might have the same ingredients. Why should I choose yours? So the content for that specific persona should be leaning into that study data, transparency around ingredients, purity and sourcing, and bringing in third parties to verify the claims. Our second one is the active ager, so a slightly older demographic, slightly different kind of creative strategy that you might need. So different motivators and barriers. From a motivator perspective, we might be looking at things just about making my day-to-day more functional. I want to do the same things I've always done. I don't want to have to stop doing them just because of my age. It might be looking at that change over time, like that they might be taking more than one supplement. It's that compounding evidence of taking different things to help them age gracefully, and simplicity of use. So it's difficult to remember to take your vitamins in the morning, isn't it? I want to be able to fit it into a simple routine. From a barrier perspective, because it's an aging demographic, they might not be interested in the appearance side of things. They want to know about that freedom of movement. Again, result timeline anxiety. They might have been through a process of taking a supplement for a long time in the past. Addressing how long they're supposed to wait up front could be really beneficial and get them into your brand. And medical gatekeeping. It's an audience that's likely listening to their GPs. Why is their GP not mentioning it by now? They might just not have the knowledge. So it's about reframing collagen as a mobility investment, not just something that people use for beauty. And we've got to focus on that functionality side of things and the benefits that they would get from taking your product. So we take all that, look back at that original process, and then we can look at specific hooks. So I've taken that second persona that we've got there, the active ager. We can look at the psychological trigger of functional freedom, so freedom of movement, and then we can map it to specific hook types, which enables that content differentiation. And they're not built out creative concepts, but they're ideas that you could take away and then go and film. So a moment of hesitation. They're doing their daily routine, but they have to stop and consider, can I still do this? Is my body still up to it? A daily compromise. So they might have been doing something differently within their daily routine and not question it, when really they should take your supplement, and maybe that would enable them to go back to the way things were. And finally, peer comparison. Someone of the same age, same demographic, but they don't have that problem. Maybe they had that problem before, but they've solved it through taking your product. So persona-based marketing is hyped, but it's hyped for a good reason. With all of that noise around content diversity and needing to produce volume, you can see that taking the time to map out and really understand your audience can make that content production side a lot easier. It can help ideate ideas in a streamlined way once you've got this framework. Let's move on from persona-based targeting. We're going to go into creative auditing now and how we look at our creative strategy. So we've got our creative audit pillars. So we've got Andromeda. We've been over this before, we've already covered, but it's diversity, persona modeling, volume, full funnel. So are you targeting users at different stages of intent, awareness, consideration, and conversion? Brand storytelling. How well are you bringing in that brand story into your ads? Paid social ads tend to get quite product focused, but that's a missed opportunity. creative execution. So it's basic best practice, but are your ads overall easy to understand and well executed? And finally, but no means least, because hooks are the most important part of your ads, are your hooks effective? So for this, let's look at it in a practical way. I've looked at Seep specifically. For anyone that doesn't know Seep, they're one of the fastest growing cleaning brands in the EU, and for good reason. They're a disruptor brand, so they're really going after the classic green sponge and microplastics specifically. And they've got a great creative direction. So I've given myself quite a hard task actually of auditing this brand because they're doing things well already. So what are they doing well? Let's have a look at a couple of examples mapped back to that framework that I just shared with you a second ago. So brand storytelling.
This everyday item is full of plastic. And every time you squeeze it, scrub with it, wash up with it, it's releasing tiny
They're founder backed. The founder led content is everywhere. She's great at speaking to camera. It really gets across that connection between the founder and the brand. It's a personal journey for her and a personal product.
This is one of the easiest ways to reduce the microplastics in your home. I am really worried.
I think this is a great hook. It's kind of behind the scenes, how the sausage was made, the things that you don't see around the classic green and yellow sponge. It's definitely scroll stopping. It's anything that's behind the scenes gets you to stop. Next, we've got celebrity backing. So not all brands have the benefit of being backed by a dragon, but that is also incorporated within their ads.
I have literally seen thousands of pictures. Every now and then you get one that comes in, it makes my heart beat. And
finally, we've got diversification. So they're doing all of that right, but they're also leaning into trends, specifically around ASMR, looking at that from a cleaning perspective. So a simple ad, I don't know how long I'd watch it for, but it would definitely make me stop. They're also doing a lot of other things right. They've got a great format split. They've got a good volume of ads, really focused on one specific persona, just the eco-conscious consumer. And they've got great social first production. In terms of potential improvements, so again, mapped to that framework, the persona direction is focused on microplastics. If I was going to take a step back, I would potentially lean into the health issues of microplastics. Most people know what microplastics are, but do they know how it affects our bodies? That's something isn't in a few ads, but it's often buried within wider videos. Their overall brand strategy is also focused on microplastics. It does feel a little bit narrow. At what point will they reach a threshold with that? Potentially there are other angles they can go into. There's a limited branded partnership ads, and I think definitely for cleaning, because there's a huge cleaning community on TikTok in Clean Talk. The lack of content creators feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. From a diversification standpoint, the one ad visual style I would like to include is motion graphics. I think it could work really well for this kind of product. From a funnel perspective, everything feels quite consideration and awareness focused. Their bottom of the funnel ads could work harder. I think they're purposely leaning into paid social as an awareness driving channel. They might have a hesitation to running lower funnel, but often some of those lower funnel messages are hidden.
The question is, even though they're microplastic free and better for the planet, do they actually work? Well, we've got thousands of online reviews.
So there we saw reviews hidden 6 seconds, 7 seconds into an ad. There's not much of that up front. That could really elevate their strategy. From a brand storytelling perspective, the founder is in all their ads, but they lack potentially a hero video piece, the origin story of the brand. It comes across in UGC formats, but when it's bundled in with all of the other assets that are UGC, it could get lost. From a creative execution standpoint, they're well templated, but formulaic. So potentially some diversification there could help. And one pretty technical, but a bugbear is just around their static imagery. I think they could have a bit more hierarchy to their image ads. So glancing at this ad here, you can see everything's in the same font. I don't know where to look first. By adding a bit more hierarchy, it could really help. And then in terms of scroll stopping ability, everything's fear-based. It's clearly working for them. I'm not gonna go. They're the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing brands in the US, as I said before. But it's really over reliant on a single theme. Perhaps that's something they could branch out in the future, leaning into specific personas like parents or families that are concerned about having microplastics in the home. And that's the Andromeda section done. We're now going to be moving into an interview with Toby when he joins me from the ether. Here he is. How are
Hello.
you, Toby?
Yeah, doing great. The weather's good. Feeling good today. Yeah, thanks for having
As
me
we
on.
just spoke about, very British to talk about the weather. It makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It
Yeah,
does. It does
but
indeed.
yeah. Do you want to just start off by giving a quick intro to yourself and NUSA and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Toby. We are a social first content studio, so essentially somewhere between a creative agency and a production company. And yeah, we create social content for brands all the way from kind of small startups and scale ups all the way up to bigger household names.
Yeah, you work with some amazing brands. Yeah, Wild Deodorant, Surreal Cereal. Yeah, really good brands to work with. So let's get into it. Let's talk about briefs to start with. Just spoken about volume and that need to produce more content. We've spoken in the past that creative briefing is so fundamental to getting a good output. What are the main challenges you see in creative briefing today?
Yeah, great question. I think the first one that probably wins by a mile is just lack of strategic clarity. I think a lot of marketers probably need to get out of that mindset of we need content, we need video content, and actually move towards more of a strategic POV. So, what's the actual tangible business outcome or marketing outcome that you want to drive? Are you trying to drive awareness or consideration, conversion? Really thinking about that is a great starting point. AI can also be really helpful for that. I think a lot of people have trouble diagnosing what the issue is in the first place and why this brief is kind of even existing. So using AI to help you do that can be really helpful. I think the second thing is probably spending like twice the amount of time you think you need to write a brief. So there's a really interesting stat out there, which is 80% of marketers think they write good briefs and only 10% of agencies agree, which is quite a funny one. And I can completely see why it happens. Everyone is time poor, and the brief often gets kind of put on the back burner or delegated to someone else. But ultimately, the brief is the single most important kind of document or piece of work that will dictate how strong a project is, an ongoing relationship, or a campaign. So yeah, one tip I'd have is actually just having like a in-depth meeting before you actually put together the brief, get all the stakeholders involved, record it, and then you can use like an AI tool to actually pull together a really tight brief. And then the last one I'd probably say is don't try to do too much at once. I think especially for smaller and growing brands, it can be quite overwhelming to think how much stuff you actually need to do. So try and be as laser focused as possible. I always say if you can't get the objective down to a single sentence, you've probably already lost the battle. So I think that's a really helpful one.
Yeah, that upfront work can be so important to getting a good output. So in terms of having a super concise brief, if you're going to only include three essential components, what would they be?
Yeah, the first one would always be a clear objective. So that's the most sort of critical element. And the person who's making the content or receiving the brief, they need to know what the desired outcome is. Otherwise, you might just get a completely different result. The other thing that is really important is just like really detailed audience information, kind of going back to what you were talking about personas earlier, as much detail as possible, not just around kind of demographics and the usual stuff, but actually what do the audience care about? What are their desires, their behaviors, their kind of mindsets? At what point are they actually thinking about buying your product or brand. And then the last one is a detailed timeline. Sounds obvious, but we receive quite a lot of briefs that aren't super detailed on timelines. So kind of aim for really specific key like dates, like live dates, key milestones, and even just putting in any kind of holidays from stakeholders that are going to be away throughout the process, just to make sure everything is ticking along and stays on track.
Great. The second question talked about briefing. Let's talk about similarity. I can imagine that's quite a big challenge to address within content production. How do you structure a shoot to get visually distinct assets to address that visual diversity that we need in paid social these days?
Yeah, great question. I think this is probably the biggest one people struggle with all the meta updates. I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a bit of a pain that we need to have all this kind of diversity. But there's a few things that I think are really important to consider here. So I would say really importantly, having like multiple talent per shoot. So having different people in front of the camera, whether it's kind of creators, models, talent, even like celebrities for that diversity. Multiple locations or kind of settings that you're shooting in. So you might have a single sort of like house location for a shoot day, but actually finding different rooms within that location. So if you're shooting a product, is it in the kitchen? Is it in the living room, etc.? And then just a real mixture of production value as well. So everything from kind of hi-fi down to mid-fi, down to lo-fi. So you really want to avoid those things that are kind of just shooting like one video or just one location, one talent, or even just like simple copy changes. I think one important thing to bear in mind is you're constantly balancing like volume with creative quality. So, anyone could try and shoot, thousands of ads in a day, but obviously the quality is not going to be there. So I think just balancing those, being realistic with what you can shoot. Obviously you want to push the team to get as much content as possible, but making sure the quality doesn't suffer as a result of that. And in terms of, I guess, what an efficient sort of shoot day would look like, I would probably structure the day in two halves. So aim for kind of 3 setups potentially in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, with multiple hooks between setups. Varying your talent, as I said earlier. So maybe you could have like one model in the morning, one in the afternoon. Thinking in terms of different types of content. So are you shooting sort of hi-fi, lo-fi? Are you capturing those different types? One thing that can be useful is shooting in more of like a pod system. So if you're shooting across multiple rooms in a location, you could actually have dedicated teams. So you might have one team shooting stills or statics, and then one team shooting video, and they can sort of rotate around. Obviously, it's a little bit more tricky to plan those, but can be a bit more cost effective. Just planning loads is really helpful. So just having a very detailed spreadsheet covering timings. So at what point exactly are you going to be shooting with a certain model? What type of content are you going to be shooting? Do you need any props? What are all those kind of things you need to be doing? I think the more you can save your mental load on the shoot day, just because it tends to be quite hectic, the smoother things run. And then just staying flexible on the shoot day as well. There will be things that go wrong. There always are. So, talent being late or having the wrong clothes on or something like that. So just building in a little bit of time and buffer so that you're ready to adapt on the day.
Yeah, I can't imagine the amount of planning, coordination that needs to go into a shoot day, especially with working with celebrities and influence, etc. I'm going to move on to another question, slightly different. So I'm going to talk about AI later. And AI is pretty divisive in creative. To what extent are your team actually using AI tools in your creative processes right now?
Yeah. Great question. So AI, I think, can be quite powerful across the entire sort of production process. Some agencies are like using AI loads, some are not at all. I'd say we take a more nuanced approach and we're somewhere in the middle. I think number one, and this comes in quite early, is finding customer insights, sort of pain points, pushes and pulls, like you said earlier. You can obviously plug in all your kind of customer data, depending on privacy and things like that, and like tap into research, reviews, forums, etc. And then you can actually use AI to help generate content ideas based off those. So I think that's really helpful, especially when you're dealing with large amounts of data or just lots of different subjective data. And then modular editing is also quite useful. So there's now kind of more software and stuff coming out that can help with creating just different iterations and versions of winning ads. And then I think lastly, one that's quite useful is just like a creative sounding board. So the temptation a lot of the time is to go straight into it and just ask, put in your brief and say, give me ideas essentially in ChatGPT or whatever AI platform you're using. But I much prefer to use it as a sort of creative sounding board. So I'll put in an idea and do some upfront thinking and then actually prompt it. What am I missing here? Are there any different angles or ways that I could take this idea, which is quite good.
Yes. In terms of like the specific tool usage, I'm going to speak about some AI tools later, but for the modular editing, to me, that's what interests me. What kind of tools are you using to recut ads, and how are you using them in the process?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's an automated tool called sort of automated creative. So they do some really great stuff with actually taking lots of ad content and then putting it into their system and like cutting different ads. So I'd look at them, and I think there's quite a few different kind of softwares being developed at the moment, and people just kind of vibe coding their own stuff. So lots, I think, is going to change over the sort of coming year. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, there's a lot of I don't know. I didn't know what vibe coding was until a few months back, but everyone's apparently doing it. Cool. And then final question, Toby. We spoke about partnerships with celebrities coming on to shoots. Can you talk to us a little bit about talent sourcing? So that's not something that we're involved with. You are involved with it a lot of your day to day. What does that look like from a talent sourcing perspective?
Yeah, so obviously talent sourcing can be quite an important part of the process. Probably one that is underestimated in how much time it takes as well, because of the admin involved with going back and forth. I think first of all, you want to define what you actually need. So what type of talent? So if you're looking for, say, models, you might want to use Mandy, which is a platform where you can put out casting calls, or sort of agencies. If you want to use actors, so you need a little bit more performance out of them, again, Mandy's good. Star Now, you can use like freelance casting directors or agencies. Then as you're kind of moving up in terms of cost, you've got creators. So I think just looking on X is really good, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. LinkedIn can be quite handy as well, one that's quite underrated. Even just looking through like TikTok, they've got a creator marketplace. Instagram, AI is pretty good as well for doing searches. And there's like quite a few different online platforms as well. Then as you're moving towards like influencers, I'd say again, those online platforms or kind of like agencies are probably your best bet for people that are actually represented. And then finally, celebrities will be agencies or individual agents that kind of look after their calendar and what jobs they're going to say yes and no to. So yeah, across the spectrum, you've got like models, then actors, creators, influencers, and celebs. So actually working out what can you afford and what's best for the project.
And you mentioned at the start about mapping things out. What does that actually look like when you get a brief? How do you map out what you need?
In terms of talent?
Yeah, talent for specific brands or briefs.
Yeah, I'd say that really depends on, well, first of all, you want to make sure the talent matches whatever your persona or your kind of customer segment is. And then it will really depend on your objective. If you're trying to drive kind of mass, very broad awareness, obviously celebrities can kind of be useful. If you're looking for very much kind of business as usual content, maybe content that's going to go on paid social, the website, and it might be more skewed towards photography, I'd probably just look at using models. So really depends what the kind of need is there driving it.
Great. That was super insightful. I know we had a few other questions prepped, but if anyone has any questions in the prep in the chat for Toby, we can always follow up afterwards. Thanks for all of that, Toby. It's great to get that reality from a production side. And now I'm gonna have Ryan join me to give a slightly different perspective, but this time from the brand point of view. Hi, Ryan. How's it
Hi
going?
Sam, how are you? Yeah, all good.
Yeah,
All
good,
good.
thank you. Do you want to give a little quick intro into yourself, your role at Berlin Blend?
Yeah. So I'm Ryan. I'm the digital marketing manager at Burn and Blend. We're a tea and matcha brand selling both online and across our 30 stores in the UK, and we're on a mission to kind of really showcase the magical world of tea to everyone.
Nice. And you also have some really excellent paid social creative. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, I've spoken a bit about volume today. From a brand point of view, how are you adapting internally from a resourcing perspective to meet that demand?
Yeah, it's no surprise. I think the way the paid social platforms are going nowadays, it's only going to get more important to get that creative volume and that creative diversification. And we've seen it that it can't just be sort of surface level tweaks like changing colors of fonts or backgrounds. And to really respond to that, I've made it a bit of a focus this year to be a bit more resourceful, working closely with other teams, so like our CRM team or our organic social team, trying to identify content that we could potentially repurpose or adapt for paid social channels. And I think that's been really valuable in a couple of ways. So, firstly, we're maximizing the use of each content created, so it's not just sitting for one sort of moment. And secondly, it sort of naturally drives that creative diversity because each department's sort of creating content for different purposes and with different messages. So again, just helps add to that diversity element.
Nice. In terms of, I think it's super smart in terms of working what we've already got. As an agency, we're trying to use organic content a lot more within our paid social strategies. That's something that you're doing as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best example for that is our recent campaign. So we're just finishing up our Easter campaign. And part of that, we do these matcha infused Easter eggs. And a lot of our content that we produced for it from a paid perspective was quite product focused. And whilst they were doing quite well, it was really hard to kind of scale those pieces of content. So we kind of worked with our organic social team just to see what kind of content they've got briefed in and creating. And they did this really weird one that we never would have thought of, where they just got the Easter egg and actually made a matcha latte in the Easter egg. And it was just a really completely different angle. It was like 6 seconds, didn't have any voiceover. It wasn't really like a selly type of ad, but that ad did really well. And when we layered it into like paid social, it just really was able to scale, and we could see the conversions come through.
Yeah, I can see how that could work well. Seasonal moment, chocolate, tea, all brought into one. So second question, in terms of balancing brand identity, how do you balance hi-fi, lo-fi content, especially when we see a lot of brands these days running more UGC? How do you manage that internal debate around that type of conversation?
Yeah, so as a brand, and I guess as a digital team, we are quite data led, and performance data is incredibly important to us. So if we do see that kind of lo-fi UGC style outperforming, we absolutely lean into that. Alongside this, I think what's great about Burn and Blend is that everyone in their sort of departments got that empowerment and ownership across what they're doing, and that kind of gives us the confidence as a team to kind of work with the data, and to also trust our knowledge within the paid social platforms to try and test different content. And it also just circles back to that main goal of creative diversification. So we know, and also it's a good thing that our senior managers know as well, that this is important to feed the algorithm nowadays. It's like gone are the days where the granular targeting of interest audience based. It's all about how can we produce different content.
Yeah, I can see how that could work. In terms of like I spoke about volume and you've spoken about volume as well. One of the main problems that I see with volume is just keeping that brand story consistent, especially when we're talking about 500,000 assets, which is being put out there at the moment. How do you feel about scaling content and diversity, but keeping it distinctly Bird and Blend?
Yeah, I think I can see how that's a challenge, but I think for us, it kind of goes down to defining who we are as a brand. And this kind of goes beyond the standard brand guidelines. Of course, we adhere to standard brand guidelines, but we try and dig a bit deeper about who the brand is, its personality, its values, why essentially does it exist. And at Burn and Blend, we're all kind of clear why we do what we do. So across all our ads, you'll see our tagline, spreading happiness, reimagining tea. And those aren't just sort of throwaway words. The brand was founded on this core idea of how we can do better business, not only for the planet, but for people. And it goes to that sense, like, can we bring a bit of joy and happiness into someone's life over a cup of tea? So when we're looking to kind of scale content and create different types of content, we're kind of going beyond, yes, it meets the brand guidelines, but we also want to see, does it make people feel the same way and ties back into why we exist as a brand? And I guess, like, for us, that realization actually opens up a lot more opportunities to be creatively diverse.
Yeah, but you still have that internal process of, I know that there's a freedom element, but there's still that internal check and sign off.
Yeah, of course. From concept to briefing to creation to sign off, there's loads of different departments that are involved, and there's a lot of different eyes that are looking at, what we've got planned, what actually ends up being created before it actually goes out to the public. And again, it kind of ties back to that approach of, like, does it help the brand and its values, and does it align with that?
Yeah, nice. Moving on slightly, so just thinking about creative diversity again, but this time retail stores. So something that we ask our clients that do have retail stores for is that in-store content. I know it's something that you don't currently have set up right now and are exploring, but what do you think the biggest opportunities and challenges are with that?
Yeah, it is definitely an avenue that we're exploring. I think the brand actually started off as a store before it moved on to online sales, so it would be great to kind of get that content shown across our ads. I guess operationally, we've been, again, this year being a bit more focused on working collaboratively. The organic team have a really naturally good relationship with the stores, so we're trying to work out how we can work closer with them, with their built up relationship with store managers, to kind of get content that we could also use on ads. So again, just being a bit more vigilant with what other teams are doing.
Nice. And then another content type that we like to have in our accounts is influencer-led content. So anything that's creator-led, that's something that you're currently doing. What does that workflow currently look like for creator-led content? And another challenge that we find with it is just finding that balance between allowing a content creator to go off and do what they do best and be authentic to their profile and how their tone of voice, but that can sometimes be at odds to the core brand tone of voice. How do you manage those kind of those operational headaches?
Yeah, so I think we've got a pretty good setup at Burn and Blend in terms of how we manage our influencer work. So it actually sits within our brand team, and they're quite hands-on when selecting the right creators that align with our brand and really focus on building that genuine relationship with them. So the brand team leads in terms of briefing and working with influencers on that individual basis. And we, as the performance marketing team, come in from a point of view afterwards to see if we can use that content on ads. And I think we've worked on that approach quite a lot recently. And I think the benefit from that is that the content produced when brand work with influencers is a lot more genuine and organic, rather than it feeling a lot scripted and people know that it's an ad. So, the brand team are able to work on that relationship closely rather than it just feeling like a bit of a business transaction.
Nice. Yeah, I think influencer marketing sometimes, where it's developed quite organically over the last few years, it kind of, with every brand that we speak to, it kind of sits in different teams. It's interesting to hear how it works with Bird and Blend. Just broadly on influencer marketing, it's become so important to some of our paid social strategies over the last year. What do you feel like the biggest pros and cons are with it at the moment?
Yeah, I think obviously the main pro for influencer content is that it just adds to that content diversity. You're getting a piece of content that would be quite slightly hard to replicate at home. But I think, as we all imagine, one of the biggest cons is the costs. And I guess that's for us where it's important how we define how we analyze the success of creator content. Like, is it on an individual ad level, or is it how it supports the overall ad account?
Yeah, it's outrageous, some of the costs, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Should have been an influencer, but maybe I'm trying to be.
It's not too late.
No, it's not too late. There's still time. Yeah, we see, yeah, it's really, it's expensive. The content's expensive, but we do see just the impact on click-through rates. Click-through rates are sometimes outrageous in comparison to some of our account baselines. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So thanks, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, really useful to get that brand side perspective. There's so many agencies out there pushing volume. I can see how that could be a difficult thing to get to grips with from like an internal perspective. So it was really insightful. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you. Okay, last section. Here we go. The diversive topic of AI creative. Let's get into it. So AI creative is a fast emerging industry. I think we've seen across so many industries just the development of so many new tools, and AI creative specifically didn't really exist before. So it's difficult to know where to start, but let's start by looking at Meta's own creative enhancements, so their AI options, and see the wonders of what it can do. So taking a simple product shot and developing something really amazing, really. So it's great at taking shots of images, of products, of models, and generating backgrounds. It can help with that diversity element, and get more visual concepts within your ad account. So let's see what it can do. Not great, is it? I think, truth be told, Meta's AI creative isn't quite where we want it to be at the moment. We are using on some accounts, but it can deliver some questionable results. My personal favorite is this rogue hand sticking out of a jumper. But for the purpose of this, I'm not going to be speaking specifically about Meta. I'm going to be moving further afield and just looking at the landscape in general and looking at the many, 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 many tools that are out there right now. So we've got image models, video models, AI avatar models, aggregators as well. These are some aggregators that have been recently released, which are actually really handy because they pull some of these models into a single use tool. But it can be difficult to know where to start, especially when the industry is changing all the time. Last week or even last month, OpenAI depreciated its Sora model. It was just too expensive to run, but interestingly, it was one of a video creation tool that was delivering some of the best output. So where do you start with this? We've had Toby on today to speak about how he's using it in post-production modular editing. And a good way of thinking about this is breaking out that creative process from start to finish. So that analysis and strategies perspective, where we might be thinking about what we make, we're going to be using on research from social media platforms and LLMs. The ideation, where again, we're going to be using LLMs, but there are good creative strategy tools out there such as Motion and Atria. Scripting, again, LLMs can be good for this if you give it the right guidance. And then when it comes to production, there's image generation tools, there's video generation tools, and then finally we've got post-production as well. So let's start with that image generation side. There are a lot of different tools out there. Since putting this together, ChatGPT have actually upgraded their module, which just shows how often these things are changing. ChatGPT's model is called Image 1.5. It's now Image 2.0. The benefits of it are that it's really good at rapid testing and conversational editing. You don't need to do much to get a pretty decent output. The problem with it, or at least it was, that it felt quite AI based. Second one is a tool called Midjourney. So Midjourney is quite different to some of these other tools. It's very stylistic. It's good, potentially not for product-based imagery. It can be quite over-stylized. We've got Nano Banana, which probably everyone's heard of. It's fast, free, very photorealistic. Within Google Ads, you can use it on your existing products. It's being built seamlessly into the Google Ads experience, but it can have a limited stylistic range. You kind of know when you've seen a Nano Banana ad or image. Ideogram, so slightly different to some of the other tools. A problem with these other models is text rendering. You've probably seen AI images where the text just makes no sense. Ideogram looks to move past this. So they have great text accuracy, but there are pros and cons. It's good at illustrative content, but it's not very photographic. So I gave it I've been using all these tools, but probably more hours than I should have into this, testing them all out, giving them simple tasks. So let's look at a simple use case. So in this example, I took a influencer shot or model shot from one of our clients. I removed the jewelry from her, and I've asked all of these image models to put this product back on. Let's have a look at some of the results. So starting with ChatGPT's image 1.5, I think I actually used 1.5 first and then used 2, and 2 was a lot better actually, but it's kept the character reference. Product shot is great, but it's kept a lot of the product detail, which you'll see in some of these other models it struggles with. Mid-Journey, you can see how it becomes over stylized. It can't keep the product. And yeah, we wouldn't be using it within paid marketing specifically for this. Nano Banana, again, pretty good, comparable to image 1.5. It's kept the model almost exactly. I actually think it does a worse job on the product than ChatGPT. And then Ideogram, again, not great. The product is just all off. Both Midjourney and Ideogram give you multiple variants when you put in a prompt. So it just becomes obsessed with the hand for some reason. Let's give it a more challenging brief. Let's try and take this model and put it into a UGC format and see what the results are. So it took me a while to spot this one, but there's an extra hand, and it seems to be the model's hand. So not great. I think that overall it does still feel like it is AI, but the results are not bad. And let's have a look at ChatGPT's 2.0 image generator. And I actually think this is the best result. The model doesn't look quite the same, but we could improve that. But in terms of fitting that UGC content, I think it does a really good job. It almost doesn't feel like it's being produced by AI. Now let's have a look at video generation. So video generation is trickier. A good step within any AI creative process is to generate all of your images first as references for your video. And again, we've got a number of tools. We've got Google's VEO. It's a good all-rounder. We've got Kling, which is a model, it's an Asian model. It has long sequencing. You can run a continuous sequence for 180 seconds when VEO only offers a maximum of 8, but it becomes hit and miss. We've got Runway, which is quite unique as a tool because it adds in a lot of director level tools in terms of editing, controls, and effects, something that VEO or a lot of other tools are lacking. You have to run the prompt again. That can become quite frustrating. And then finally, we've got Cdance, which is ByteDance's video generation tool. This is definitely the one to watch, I would say, in terms of capabilities. It's relatively new, but it produces some really good results. And in terms of that referencing that I spoke briefly about before in terms of image referencing, you can give it text, image, video, and audio and build it into your the video that you want to create. Particularly good for action shots and movie generation. So just like that image generation, let's look to see what we can do with video. So here I have taken another Diamond Store asset, a hero video, and I've then tried to rebuild it in VEO. So what you're looking for here is 3 distinct scenes. You've got a record player at the start, you've got some branding, then you have got a top-down table view, and finally you've got a model cheersing to camera. So let's watch the first video. And now let's watch the VEO version. And then very quickly, I'm going to try and play them at the same time. So apparently I was overcritical of this asset yesterday when I presented the same content. For me, you could very clearly tell that VEO asset is produced by AI. It seems just too perfect. It's less emotive. It has problems with the text rendering in places. It just lacks that style that you could get from truly original human-made content. Not to say that we can't get there, but for me, for that kind of content specifically, it took a lot of work to get to that stage. And the output, I'm not sure would ever be usable within paid ads. Not to say that these tools aren't going to improve and get better in probably quite a short period of time. Let's look at another quick use case for video generation, so specifically around UGC. So Ryan earlier spoke about how influencer-led content is expensive to make, expensive to get and agree those contracts. And UGC for brands is also quite a big challenge. Often they just don't know where to start. And there are several tools out there at the moment that are starting to produce AI avatars that can replace some of that UGC generation. You're never going to get the backing that you would get through influencer content where they have that following that they get, but it can deliver some quite surprising and horrifying results. Let's have a look at a familiar face.
Watching them play is one of life's simple joys, and you want to know they're safe. Our Jitsi floral rocking horse is designed with that in mind, meeting the highest safety standards for your peace of mind. With its sturdy wooden rockers and a comfy seat, it ensures every little adventure is a safe one. Give the gift of cherished, worry-free play. Visit us at mamasandpapas.com.
It's the last scene that really gets me. It's just not right. There's something wrong. There's something very wrong happening there. But that's not to say it couldn't be useful. I didn't spend too much time generating that. I didn't feed it too much information apart from a basic prompt and just one character reference of myself. If I provide it with multiple character references, multiple videos, I'm sure the results would be better. And what I've seen is that that style of UGC replacement is actually becoming a little bit more widely used. With some UGC generators, so I tested some other ones in Creatify, you almost can't tell that it is a AI. You've all seen me present for an hour now. You know that I don't talk like that necessarily. So if you see it from scratch with a fresh perspective, I think it does become more usable. So in terms of 4 key actions with the AI, we didn't get into the research phase today, but if you're interested in how you can use LLMs and creative tools for research and ideation, feel to reach out afterwards. And I've got a couple prompts and use cases that I can share. From an image generation standpoint, I'd recommend testing out Nano Banana if you haven't already. Also test out ChatGPT's OpenAI's new model because it delivers some really useful results. From a video perspective, VEO is free to use in places. It exists within Gemini. There are specific dedicated platforms. You can test it for free. I'd recommend testing that one out first. And again, with the UGC side of things as well, HeyGen is free to use beyond the point. You can get a free trial, test it out, see if you can produce the kind of results that I did there. So that is, stop sharing my screen. That's your lot. So yeah, there's a lot of content in the space of an hour. I'm not gonna lie, I'm quite exhausted and I'm gonna need a good lay down after this and a cup of tea. Might go for a walk. It's a nice sunny day. So thanks again to Toby and Ryan for joining us. If you had any questions in the comments, we'll follow up with these afterwards. Feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn as well if you need any help with your creative strategy. And we'll leave it there. We'll hopefully see you on the next one. Thanks for joining.